You invited me here to humiliate me, Victor. Did you think I would come alone? The champagne glass in Victor Hartwell's hand stopped halfway to his lips. His confident smile, the one he had practiced for boardrooms and press conferences for over 2 decades, vanished like smoke in winter air. He stared at the woman standing before him in the crowded ballroom, but his eyes kept drifting to the 2 young women flanking her sides. 15 years old. Dark hair. Sharp blue eyes that he saw every morning in his own mirror. The angular jaw that had marked Hartwell men for 4 generations. Maggie. His voice came out as barely a whisper. The crystal chandeliers of the Pierre Hotel seemed to dim around him, the murmur of 300 guests fading to nothing. I believe you have not met your daughters. Her voice carried across the now silent Gala with perfect clarity. Not loud. Not angry. Simply a statement of fact delivered with the calm precision of someone who had waited 15 years to speak it. Olivia and Charlotte. Born 7 months after you finalized our divorce. 15 years is a long time to miss, is it not? Welcome back to another powerful story, my beloved listeners. Kindly tell where you're watching from and what time it is where you're at. If you're new here, prepare for a story of betrayal, unexpected love, and what truly makes a family. Drop everything and listen closely. This tale of heartbreak and redemption might just change how you view love and family forever. Have you ever witnessed someone's entire world collapse in a single moment? That instant when every assumption they held about their own life, their own choices, their own superiority shatters like glass on marble floors. If you have ever been dismissed, discarded, or told you were not enough, this story will speak to something deep within you. If you believe that time reveals all truths and that consequences eventually find their way home, stay with me until the very end. Let me take you back. Not to the beginning, but to 3 weeks before that December evening when Margaret Allison stood in a ballroom surrounded by Manhattan's elite and introduced a billionaire to the daughters he never knew existed. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in early November. Maggie was in her art restoration studio in Savannah, Georgia, carefully removing decades of grime from an 18th-century portrait of a colonial merchant's wife. The woman in the painting had patient eyes, the kind that suggested she had learned to wait for better days. Maggie had always felt a kinship with the subjects of the damaged paintings she restored. They had survived neglect and time and emerged, under her careful hands, more beautiful than before. Her assistant, a young woman named Teresa, brought in the afternoon mail and set it on the corner of the work table. Maggie barely glanced up, absorbed in the delicate work of bringing the merchant wife's face back to clarity. But something made her pause. A cream-colored envelope sat atop the stack, heavy cardstock with an embossed return address she recognized immediately despite 15 years of distance. The Hartwell family crest. A ship's anchor surrounded by laurel leaves. The symbol of a maritime empire that had been moving cargo across oceans since before the Civil War. Maggie set down her brush and wiped her hands on a cloth that had seen years of pigments and solvents. She opened the envelope carefully, the way she approached all fragile things. The invitation inside announced the 100th anniversary celebration of Hartwell Maritime Industries. A Christmas gala at the Pierre Hotel, Manhattan. Black tie. The date was December 15th. Beneath the formal printing, a handwritten note in ink she still remembered despite the years. Maggie. Time heals all wounds. Join us for this milestone. Let bygones be bygones. Victor. She read the note 3 times. Then she set it down on the work table and looked at the merchant wife in the painting, those patient eyes staring back at her across centuries. He thinks I will decline, she said aloud to the empty studio. Or he thinks I will arrive alone and diminished, proof that he made the right choice when he discarded me. The merchant wife offered no response. But Maggie had not expected one. She had learned, in 15 years of rebuilding her life from nothing, that the only counsel she truly needed came from within. That evening, she sat with her daughters in the living room of their restored Victorian home in Savannah's historic district. The house was filled with art and books and the accumulated warmth of a family that had built something together. Photographs lined the staircase wall, chronicling 15 years of birthdays and graduations and ordinary Tuesdays that had somehow become extraordinary in the living of them. Olivia sat cross-legged on the floor, a thick textbook open on her lap. She was preparing for a debate tournament, researching constitutional precedents with a focused intensity that reminded Maggie of someone she had once known very well. Charlotte curled in the corner of the sofa, sketching in the notebook she carried everywhere, her pencil moving in quick, confident strokes. I need to tell you both something, Maggie said. About your father. Both girls looked up. This was not an unfamiliar topic, but something in their mother's voice suggested a new chapter was about to begin. For 15 years, Maggie had told them a gentle version of the truth. Their father was someone she had married young. He had not been ready for family. They had divorced before she knew she was pregnant. She had chosen to raise them alone rather than complicate their lives with a man who had not wanted children. It was true, as far as it went. But it was not the whole truth. Now she told them everything. She told them about meeting Victor Hartwell at a museum fundraiser in New York, when she was 25 and working as an assistant curator. She told them about the whirlwind courtship, the wedding that made society pages, the apartment on the Upper East Side that had never quite felt like home. She told them about the 4 years of marriage that became increasingly strained as month after month passed without a pregnancy. She told them about the fertility specialists and the treatments and the whispered consultations that Victor had with his father. She told them about the growing distance, the way Victor began to look at her as though she were a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. And she told them about the final conversation. Victor sitting behind his desk in his study, his father standing silently by the window, as Victor explained in measured tones that their marriage had become untenable. 4 years was sufficient time to conclude that she could not provide what the Hartwell family required. A continuation of the legacy. An heir to carry forward what 4 generations had built. He used the word barren, Maggie said quietly, as though I were a field that had failed to produce a harvest. He said he needed to make other arrangements to secure the Hartwell future. Olivia had gone very still, her debate notes forgotten. Charlotte's pencil had stopped moving. The divorce was finalized within weeks. His family's lawyers had drafted the prenuptial agreement when we were engaged. I was 25 and in love, and I signed it without truly understanding what I was giving away. When I left, I had 1 suitcase, my grandmother's pearls, and nothing else from 6 years of my life. Mom, Charlotte said softly. I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks after signing the final papers. I was staying in a borrowed room in Philadelphia, trying to figure out who I was without the life I had built around him. And then there were 2 pink lines on a test, and suddenly everything was different. Olivia spoke for the first time since Maggie began. Her voice was careful, analytical, the way she approached complex problems. Why did you not tell him? Maggie had asked herself that question countless times over 15 years. The answer had evolved as she had evolved, but the core of it remained constant. Because I knew what would happen if I did. Victor did not want a child. Victor wanted an heir. There is a difference. If I had told him, his family would have descended with their lawyers. They would have fought for custody of you both, not because they wanted to raise you with love, but because you represented what they considered their property. The Hartwell bloodline. She paused, remembering those weeks of fear and uncertainty, alone in a city where she knew almost no one. I could not bear the thought of you growing up in that world, being measured and assessed and valued only for what you could provide to their legacy. So I chose differently. I moved to Savannah, where my college roommate Dolores had settled. I built a business from nothing. And I raised you to know that you are valuable simply because you exist, not because of what you can produce for someone else. The silence that followed was heavy with years of unasked questions. Charlotte looked at the invitation still in her mother's hand. He does not know about us. No. And now he has invited you to this gala. Why? Maggie smiled slightly. It was not a happy smile. He wants to show me how successful he has become without me. He wants everyone to see the barren ex-wife who failed him, while he stands at the center of his empire celebrating a century of Hartwell achievement. It is a petty cruelty dressed up in polite language. He expects me to decline, or to arrive alone and remind everyone why he was right to discard me. Olivia closed her textbook. The sharp intelligence in her eyes was so much like Victor's that it sometimes took Maggie's breath away, though the kindness beneath it was entirely her own. What if you do not decline? What if you go? And what if we go with you? Maggie looked at her daughters. 15 years old. Old enough to make this choice for themselves. Old enough to understand what they would be walking into and what they might find on the other side. Are you certain? Once you meet him, you cannot meet him. Whatever happens next will be part of your story forever. Charlotte and Olivia exchanged a glance. The silent communication of twins who had been each other's constants since before they were born. Charlotte spoke. You have spent 15 years protecting us from him. Maybe it is time for us to see for ourselves who he really is." Olivia nodded. "We are not going for him. We are going for you. And for ourselves." To close a chapter that has been left open too long. Maggie looked at her daughters, these remarkable young women she had raised alone, and felt something shift in her chest. Pride, love, and perhaps, finally, the beginning of an ending that had been waiting 15 years to be written. "Then we go to Manhattan," she said, "and we show Victor Hartwell exactly what he threw away." The weeks between that decision and the December evening of the gala passed in a strange suspension. Maggie continued her work at the studio, bringing damaged paintings back to life with patient skill. The girls finished their fall semester, Olivia winning her debate tournament and Charlotte completing a series of watercolors for her portfolio. They shopped for dresses together, choosing carefully, wanting to look appropriate for a black tie event without appearing as though they were trying to impress. Maggie's best friend and business partner, Dolores, helped with preparations. Dolores had been there from the beginning, offering a spare room when Maggie arrived in Savannah pregnant and terrified, helping to build the art restoration business from its first small jobs to its current success. She knew the whole story, had watched Maggie put herself back together piece by piece over 15 years. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Dolores asked the night before they were scheduled to fly to New York. "That man nearly destroyed you. Walking back into his world, bringing the girls. There is no taking it back once it is done." Maggie was packing carefully, folding the deep burgundy gown she had chosen for the evening. "I know. But Dolores, I have spent 15 years building a life that has nothing to do with him. A life that is complete without his acknowledgement or his approval. I am not going back as the woman who left. She does not exist anymore. And the girls. They are old enough to make their own choices. They have questions that only meeting him can answer. I will not take that opportunity from them just because I am afraid of what it might stir up." Dolores watched her for a long moment. "You have changed, Maggie. I remember when you first arrived here. You could barely speak his name without crying. Now you talk about him like he is just someone you used to know. He is someone I used to know. He is also the father of my children, and that is a fact that cannot be changed. But he does not define me anymore. He has not for a very long time." The morning they left for New York was cold and clear, winter finally arriving in the south. The flight was uneventful. The hotel was elegant without being ostentatious. And as evening approached and Maggie dressed for the gala, she found herself surprisingly calm. She looked at her reflection in the full-length mirror. At 44, she looked nothing like the hollowed-out woman who had fled Manhattan 15 years earlier. Her auburn hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders. Her green eyes held steadiness rather than fear. The lines around her mouth spoke of laughter rather than pain. She had earned every year of her age, and she wore them well. A knock at the connecting door. "Mom, we are ready." She opened it to find her daughters standing side by side. Olivia in a structured navy dress that emphasized her sharp features. Charlotte in a softer shade of blue that complemented her more artistic nature. They were beautiful and confident and entirely themselves. "He is going to be shocked," Charlotte said with a slight smile. "That is rather the point," Olivia added. Maggie looked at them, these miraculous young women who had grown up without a father and had never seemed to lack for anything essential. "Whatever happens tonight," she said, "I want you to know that you do not owe him anything. He did not raise you. He did not know you. Your feelings about him are entirely your own to decide." "We know, Mom," Olivia said gently. Charlotte stepped forward and took her mother's hand. "We are not doing this for him. We are doing this for us. All three of us. Now let us go show New York what the Ellison women are made of." The Pierre Hotel had been dressed for the occasion. The ballroom glittered with wealth and power and carefully cultivated beauty. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Champagne flowed. A string quartet played selections from the holiday repertoire. And at the center of it all stood Victor Hartwell III, exactly where he believed he belonged. Maggie saw him immediately when they entered. He stood in a cluster of well-dressed admirers, a champagne glass in one hand, his posture radiating the confident ease of a man who had never been refused anything that mattered. At 48, he had aged into the role his family had designed for him. Distinguished silver at the temples. The kind of fitness that came from personal trainers and private gyms. A custom tuxedo that cost more than most people made in a month. She remembered him at 30, when they first met. He had been charming then, seemingly warm, full of promises about the life they would build together. She wondered now how much of that warmth had been real and how much had been the performance of a man who had been taught from birth that everything was a negotiation. The room seemed to sense their arrival before Victor did. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. The three women standing in the entrance were not on anyone's guest list of expectations. A beautiful woman in burgundy, flanked by two teenagers who bore an unmistakable resemblance to the evening's host. The whispers began immediately. Maggie did not wait for Victor to notice her. She had not come here to be discovered. She had come here to deliver a truth that had been withheld for 15 years. She walked toward him, her daughters matching her pace, and the crowd parted instinctively before them. Victor turned just as she reached him. His expression cycled through recognition, confusion, and finally a shock so profound that his face seemed to lose all color. And that was when she spoke the words that would shatter everything he thought he knew. "You invited me here to humiliate me, Victor. Did you think I would come alone?" In the moments that followed Maggie's revelation, the ballroom of the Pierre Hotel became the kind of silence that happens only when hundreds of people are simultaneously holding their breath. The string quartet had stopped playing. Conversations had died mid-sentence. Every eye in the room was fixed on the scene unfolding near the center of the dance floor. Victor Hartwell stood frozen, his champagne glass still suspended in mid-air, staring at the two young women who looked back at him with his own eyes. His mind was clearly struggling to process what he was seeing. The angular features that mirrored his own. The particular way Charlotte held her chin, exactly like his mother. The sharp intelligence in Olivia's gaze, so familiar it was like looking at old photographs of himself. "This is impossible," he finally managed, his voice barely audible. Maggie's expression remained composed. "I assure you it is not. The fertility treatments we endured together did eventually work. They simply worked after you decided I was defective and disposed of me accordingly." A woman appeared at Victor's side. Younger than Maggie by at least 10 years, with the polished appearance of someone who had been carefully selected for a role rather than fallen into love. This was Adrienne, Victor's current wife, and her face displayed a mixture of confusion and barely concealed hostility. "Victor, what is happening? Who are these people?" Before he could answer, Charlotte spoke. Her voice was clear and steady, without anger but without deference. "We are not here to cause trouble. We came because our mother received an invitation and we felt it was time to meet the man whose features we happen to share." Olivia added, "Though we understand this is unexpected. 15 years of absence tends to create that effect." Victor's father appeared from somewhere in the crowd. Victor Hartwell II was 78 years old, patriarch of the Hartwell Empire, and the man who had stood silently in Victor's study 15 years ago while his son explained to Maggie why she was being discarded. He looked at the twins with an expression Maggie could not quite read. "Perhaps," the elder Hartwell said in a voice accustomed to being obeyed, "we should continue this conversation somewhere more private." "No." Everyone turned to look at Olivia. She had spoken with the same calm authority that characterized her debate performances, the tone of someone who was not requesting but stating. "We did not come here to be hidden away," she continued. "If there are conversations to be had, they can happen here. We are not a secret to be managed." The silence stretched. Maggie watched Victor struggle visibly with a situation he had never anticipated and could not control. His usual tools, money, lawyers, social power, were useless here. His daughters stood before him, fully formed human beings who owed him nothing and wanted nothing from him except the truth. Finally, Victor's father nodded slowly. "Very well." He looked at his son. "Perhaps you should introduce us properly, Victor." It was not a request. Victor seemed to gather himself with visible effort. He set down his champagne glass on a passing waiter's tray. When he spoke again, his voice was steadier, though still carrying an undertone of shock. "This is Margaret Ellison, my first wife. And apparently," he paused, swallowing hard, "these are Olivia and Charlotte. My daughters." The whispers that rippled through the crowd were immediate and unrestrained. Phones emerged from clutches and pockets as New York society witnessed what would become the scandal of the holiday season. Victor Hartwell, who had divorced his first wife for failing to produce an heir, standing face to face with the twin daughters he never knew existed. 15 years, Victor said, finally looking directly at Maggie. You kept them from me for 15 years. Maggie met his gaze without flinching. You told me I was defective. You told me I had failed to provide what the Hartwell family required. You told me, in front of your father, that you needed to make other arrangements. When I discovered I was pregnant, 3 weeks after our divorce was finalized, I made my own arrangements. You should have told me. Should I? Her voice remained even, without heat. Tell me, Victor, what would you have done? Would you have welcomed me back as your wife, or would you have simply sent your lawyers to take the children I was carrying? To raise them as Hartwells without any influence from the woman you had already deemed unworthy? Victor had no answer. The silence stretched between them, 15 years of absence compressed into a single moment of truth. Charlotte stepped forward slightly. We are not here to relitigate the past. Mom has told us what happened, and we have made our own judgment about it. We came tonight because we wanted to meet you. To see for ourselves who you are. Olivia nodded. We do not need anything from you. We have not been deprived of anything essential. But you are part of our biology, and we felt we had the right to understand that part of ourselves. Victor looked at them, really looked, and for the first time since Maggie had known him, she saw something crack behind his composed exterior. These young women were speaking to him as equals, not as supplicants. They were not asking for his money or his name or his approval. They were simply presenting themselves as facts that had existed, all along, without his knowledge or permission. Adrian's voice cut through the moment. This is absurd. We are in the middle of the company's centennial celebration, and you are allowing this woman and her children to hijack the evening. How do we even know these girls are who she claims they are? Olivia turned to look at her. You are welcome to request a DNA test. Though I think the resemblance speaks for itself. She paused. I am sorry, I did not catch your name. Adrian Hartwell. I am Victor's wife. His current wife, Charlotte said mildly. There seem to have been several. The observation landed like a stone in still water. Maggie saw the color rise in Adrian's carefully maintained face, but before anyone could respond, Victor spoke again. Perhaps we could speak somewhere more comfortable. Not to hide anything, he added, looking at Olivia, but because this is a complicated conversation and we are surrounded by 300 people who are pretending not to listen. Maggie considered this. It was reasonable, and she had not come here to create a public spectacle. The revelation itself was public enough. The details could be discussed without an audience. That seems acceptable, she said. Girls. We will follow your lead, Charlotte said. They moved as a group toward a smaller reception room off the main ballroom. As they walked, Maggie was aware of the eyes following them, the whispered speculation, the phones recording their departure. By morning, this story would be everywhere. Victor Hartwell's secret family revealed at his own anniversary gala. But Maggie found she did not care about the gossip. She had spent 15 years building a life that did not depend on what New York society thought of her. Their opinions were irrelevant. The only thing that mattered now was what happened next. The smaller room was elegantly appointed, with leather chairs and oil paintings of sailing ships. The history of the Hartwell Empire surrounded them in gilt frames. Victor closed the door, muffling the renewed buzz of conversation from the ballroom. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Victor turned to face Maggie fully, and she saw something she had never seen in all their years together. Uncertainty. The man who had always known exactly what he wanted and exactly how to get it was, for the first time, completely at a loss. How long have you known, he asked quietly, that I was pregnant? 3 weeks after you finalized the divorce. I was staying with a friend in Philadelphia, trying to figure out who I was without the life I had built around you. Then I took a test and everything changed. And you never thought to tell me. I thought about it constantly. She met his eyes steadily. And every time I imagined the conversation, I came to the same conclusion. You had made it perfectly clear what I was worth to you. Defective, you called me. Barren. A failed investment. Why would I bring children into that environment? I would never have. Victor stopped. Even he could not complete that sentence with any conviction. You would never have what? Maggie continued. Fought for custody. Sent your lawyers. Brought the full weight of the Hartwell family to bear on a woman who had already been stripped of everything. Raised our children with your parents' philosophy, where people are valued only for what they can produce. She shook her head slowly. I knew exactly what would happen if I told you. Your family would have treated those girls as assets, not people. They would have been heirs first and children second. I could not allow that. Victor was silent. His father stood near the window, watching with the sharp eyes of a man who had built an empire through observation and calculation. Adrienne remained by the door, her expression suggesting she considered this entire situation beneath her dignity. It was Olivia who spoke next. We did not come here to make accusations or demand apologies. She looked at Victor with an assessing gaze that reminded Maggie powerfully of his own. We came because Mom received your invitation and we decided it was time. What do you want? Victor asked. His voice was guarded now, the businessman evaluating a negotiation. Charlotte answered. We want to understand who you are. Not the stories, not the newspaper articles, not even what Mom has told us. We want to see for ourselves. And then what? The twins exchanged a glance. And then we decide, Olivia said simply, whether we want anything more than that. But the decision will be ours. Not yours. Not the Hartwell family's. Ours. The directness of it seemed to catch Victor off guard. He was accustomed to people who wanted something from him, whose motivations he could understand and leverage. These young women wanted nothing except the opportunity to evaluate him on their own terms. Before he could respond, the elder Hartwell spoke for the first time since they entered the room. They are undoubtedly yours, Victor. The resemblance is unmistakable. He stepped closer, studying the twins with interest. The question is what we do about it. We are not a problem to be solved, Charlotte said evenly. We are people. We have lives and plans that existed before tonight and will continue regardless of what happens here. The old man almost smiled. You have spirit. Good. The Hartwells have always valued strength. We are not Hartwells, Olivia corrected. We are Ellisons. Our mother raised us. Our mother's values shaped us. We carry your blood but not your name, and we have no intention of changing that. The silence that followed was sharp. Victor looked at Maggie. What do you want from this, Margaret? After all these years. I want nothing from you. Her voice was quiet but firm. I built a life that needs nothing you can provide. A successful business, a home my daughters love, a community that values us for who we are rather than what we can produce. The only thing I ever wanted was for Olivia and Charlotte to know the truth and make their own choices about what to do with it. You could have pursued child support. The Hartwells have significant resources. Yes, I could have. And in exchange, I would have given your family leverage over my children's lives. Every dollar would have come with expectations, conditions, the understanding that I owed you access in return. I chose independence instead. I chose to raise them free from any obligation to people who had already demonstrated how they treat those they deem inadequate. The words hung in the air between them. Victor sat down slowly in one of the leather chairs, as though his legs had decided independently that they could no longer support him. He looked up at the twins, these strangers who were somehow his daughters, and Maggie saw something shift in his expression. I would like, he said carefully, to know you. If you would allow it. Not as Hartwell heirs. Not as anything other than what you are. I have missed 15 years. I cannot get them back. But I would like to stop missing any more. It was the first thing he had said all evening that sounded entirely genuine. I have been practical my entire life. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at a city that suddenly seemed less familiar than it had yesterday. I have made every decision based on what was strategic, what preserved the Hartwell interests, what my father considered wise. And where has it left me? At the head of a global corporation, with wealth most people cannot imagine. Alone. The word came out before he fully intended it. Married 3 times to women I selected like business acquisitions. No children I knew about because I discarded the one woman who actually gave them to me. Standing in a penthouse that has never felt like a home, wondering if any of it actually matters. Adrienne set down her coffee cup with exaggerated care. I think you are in shock. This is a lot to process. Perhaps we should postpone any decisions until you have had time to think more clearly. Perhaps you should leave. She looked at him for a long moment. If I leave, I am not coming back. Then I suppose you should decide what you actually want from this marriage. Because I am fairly certain neither of us has been honest about that for quite some time. The door closed behind her with a quiet click that nevertheless felt final. Victor remained at the window, watching the morning light spread across Manhattan, and wondered if he had just destroyed his life or finally started to rebuild it. 3 days later, Victor flew to Savannah. He had arranged the trip without telling anyone. His father would be furious. His brother would use his absence to undermine his position on the board. The media was still circulating stories about the Gala revelation, and his public relations team had strongly advised against any unscripted encounters with the mother of his newly discovered children. Victor ignored all of it. The flight was short. The rental car was anonymous. And as he drove through the unfamiliar streets of a city he had never visited, he found himself looking at everything with new eyes. This was where Margaret had built her life after he destroyed the one they shared. These were the streets his daughters had grown up on. That restaurant might be where they celebrated birthdays. That park might be where they learned to ride bicycles. 15 years of a life he had not known existed, passing by his windows in storefronts and sidewalks. The address Margaret had given him led to a brownstone in the historic district, a handsome building with a small front garden that showed evidence of careful tending even in winter. He sat in the car for a long moment before getting out, trying to rehearse what he might say. Nothing seemed adequate. He walked up the front steps and rang the bell. After a moment, the door opened, and Charlotte stood in the entrance, looking at him with an expression of mild surprise that did not quite hide her curiosity. "You came," she said. "I said I wanted to know you. You also said we would continue the conversation later. It has only been 3 days. I have discovered," Victor said carefully, "that I do not want to waste any more time." She studied him for a moment, then stepped back. "Mom is at her studio. Olivia is at school. I stayed home because I was not feeling well, but I am actually fine. I just did not want to go. Ditching school. It is called a mental health day." Charlotte led him into the house. "You have missed a lot of cultural developments in parenting." The interior of the home struck Victor immediately. It was warm in ways that had nothing to do with temperature. Art hung on the walls, some clearly professional pieces and others that looked like the work of talented amateurs. Photographs lined the staircase, showing 2 dark-haired girls at various ages, always together, always smiling. Books were stacked on surfaces and stuffed into shelves. A cat observed him from a sunny windowsill with evident suspicion. It looked like a home. Not a showplace or an investment or a symbol of status, but an actual place where people lived and grew and became themselves. "This is nice," Victor said, and meant it. Charlotte looked at him with slight surprise. "Thanks. Mom worked really hard on it. She bought the place when I was 5 and spent years restoring it. She says old things that have been damaged can become more beautiful when someone takes the time to repair them properly." The observation carried weight that Victor suspected was intentional. "Would you like coffee?" Charlotte asked. "Or tea? We have both." "Coffee would be good." He followed her to the kitchen, which was cluttered in the way of kitchens that saw actual use rather than just catering. Charlotte moved with easy familiarity, preparing coffee with the competence of someone who had learned to take care of herself. "So," she said as the coffee brewed, "what exactly did you come here to accomplish?" Victor sat at the kitchen table, feeling oddly like a job applicant being interviewed. "I came to learn. About you. About your sister. About the life you have lived that I knew nothing about. That will take more than one visit." "I understand." Charlotte handed him a mug and sat down across from him. "I should tell you that Olivia is angrier than I am. She is more analytical about things, but that means she has analyzed what you did to Mom and reached some pretty firm conclusions." "What conclusions?" "That you are capable of discarding people when they fail to meet your expectations. That you value legacy over individuals. That you made a decision based on incomplete information and never bothered to question it even when the consequences were devastating for someone who loved you." Victor absorbed this. She is not wrong. No, she is not. Charlotte wrapped her hands around her own mug. "But I am more interested in who you are now than who you were 15 years ago. People can change. Sometimes they even want to. What makes you think I have changed? You showed up in Savannah 3 days after learning we exist. You came alone, without lawyers or public relations handlers. You are sitting in our kitchen drinking coffee instead of trying to take control of the situation. She paused. Those are not the actions of someone who only cares about legacy. Victor was quiet for a moment. Your mother described the way I treated her. The things I said. The word I used. Defective. Charlotte's voice was flat. Yes, she told us. I convinced myself that I was being rational. That the decision was about securing the family's future. But the truth is that I was weak. My father had certain expectations, and I was too afraid to challenge them. It was easier to blame Margaret for the failure of our marriage than to examine whether the standards I was applying were even worth upholding. Charlotte studied him. That is more self-awareness than I expected. I have had 3 days to think about nothing else. The front door opened, and Maggie's voice called out. Charlotte, I brought lunch from that deli you like. She appeared in the kitchen doorway and stopped when she saw Victor at the table. Her expression shifted rapidly through surprise, wariness, and finally a kind of resigned acceptance. I see we have a visitor. He just showed up, Charlotte said. I offered him coffee. Maggie set down the bag she was carrying and looked at Victor with an expression he could not quite read. I did not expect you so soon. I did not expect me either, Victor admitted. But I have discovered that I am quite tired of doing what is expected. Maggie sat down at the table, not next to Charlotte but not as far from Victor as she might have positioned herself. The kitchen, which had felt almost spacious when it was just Charlotte and Victor, now seemed to contract around the weight of 15 years of history. Your wife called me, Maggie said. This morning. Victor felt his jaw tighten. What did she want? She wanted to inform me that any claims against the Hartwell estate would be vigorously contested. She also suggested that if I was seeking a settlement, I should name a figure and save everyone the trouble of litigation. That is not, Victor started. I know. Maggie's voice was calm. I told her that I have no intention of making any claims and that if she wished to negotiate with someone, she should try a mirror. Charlotte made a small sound that might have been a laugh. Adrienne and I are separating, Victor said. It was not a difficult decision in the end. Because of us, Charlotte asked. Because of a great many things. You were simply the catalyst that made the rest of it clear. He looked at Maggie. I came here without a plan, Margaret. I do not know what a relationship with my daughters would look like. I do not know if you or they would even want me in their lives. I only know that I could not spend another 15 years not knowing them. What exactly are you proposing? Maggie asked. I do not know. He spread his hands, a gesture of helplessness that looked foreign on a man accustomed to commanding every room he entered. Whatever you would allow. Whatever they would allow. I have resources and connections, but I suspect those are not things you value. I have time, though. More of it, now that I am stepping back from daily management of the company. You are stepping back, Charlotte looked surprised. The centennial celebration was meant to be a transition. My father wanted me to announce an expansion into Asian markets, to cement my place for another decade of leadership. Instead, I am announcing a move to Chairman Emeritus. My brother will take over daily operations. I will remain on the board, but my focus is going to shift. To what? Maggie asked. To figuring out who I am when I am not defined by Hartwell Maritime. And to learning, if you will teach me, how to be part of a family instead of just a legacy. The kitchen was silent. Outside, a bird sang something that sounded almost like a question. Charlotte spoke first. You understand that this is not going to be easy. Olivia has a lot of anger. She is not quick to trust and she is very protective of Mom. I understand. And we are not going to rearrange our lives to accommodate your schedule. If you want to know us, you come to where we are. We do not come to you. I understand that too. Maggie looked at her daughter, something unspoken passing between them. Then she looked at Victor. I spent 15 years protecting them from you. From what I believed you would do if you knew they existed. She paused. I am willing to consider that I might have been wrong about some of it. But trust is built slowly, Victor. You do not get to skip to the end because you have decided to change. I am not asking to skip anything. I am asking to start. The word hung in the air between them. Start. Such a small word for such a large request. Charlotte stood and collected the coffee mugs, moving to the sink in a way that suggested she was giving the adults a moment of privacy. Victor watched her, this young woman who moved through the kitchen with such easy confidence, and felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest. He had missed 15 years of her life. 15 years of Olivia's life. He could not get those years back. But perhaps, if he was very lucky, if he worked very hard at becoming someone worthy of their consideration, he might be allowed to be present for what came next. Maggie stood. Olivia gets home at 3:30. If you want to see her, you should stay. But be prepared for a more difficult conversation. I will stay. Fine. She picked up the deli bag Charlotte had abandoned. In the meantime, you might as well have lunch. Charlotte, set another place. As they ate sandwiches at the kitchen table, the conversation shifted to smaller things. Charlotte's art portfolio for college applications. Maggie's business and the restoration project she was currently working on. The cat, whose name was Vermeer and who apparently judged everyone but had decided to allow Victor temporary tolerance. It was the most domestic hour Victor had experienced in years. Perhaps ever. And when Olivia walked through the front door at 3:45, her face cycling through shock and anger when she saw him sitting in their kitchen, Victor found himself feeling something he had not felt in a very long time. Hope. But also fear. Because the look in his other daughter's eyes suggested that the road ahead would be much longer and harder than anything he had faced in any boardroom. You have got to be kidding me, Olivia said, her backpack sliding off her shoulder and landing on the floor with a thud. And Victor understood, in that moment, that all the wealth and power in the world could not buy what he was looking for. He would have to earn it. One conversation at a time. One moment of honesty after another. Starting right now, with a daughter who had every reason to reject him. I know I am not welcome here, he said quietly. Not yet. But I would like to change that, if you will let me try. Olivia looked at her mother. Looked at her sister. Then looked back at Victor with an expression that contained 15 years of questions and the beginning of what might, someday, become answers. Fine, she said finally. Talk. And so he did. Olivia stood in the doorway of the kitchen, her backpack on the floor where she had dropped it, her expression containing the kind of controlled fury that Victor recognized from his own mirror. She had his eyes, his jaw, his particular way of holding tension in her shoulders when she was preparing for a confrontation. But the steadiness beneath the anger, that came from somewhere else entirely. Talk, she had said. And so Victor did. He started with the truth, because he suspected that anything less would be immediately detected and dismissed. He told her about the man he had been 15 years ago. The expectations he had internalized without questioning. The way his family measured value and how he had applied those measurements to his marriage without ever stopping to consider whether they were worth applying. He did not make excuses. He did not try to soften what he had done. He simply laid it out, fact by fact, the way he might have presented a business case to a skeptical board. Except this was not business. This was his daughter, and she was evaluating him with the same analytical precision he had used to evaluate her mother all those years ago. When he finished, Olivia was quiet for a long moment. She had not sat down. She remained standing near the doorway, arms crossed, maintaining the distance between them like a boundary she was not ready to surrender. So you threw Mom away because she could not produce children on your schedule, Olivia said finally. And now you show up here because it turns out she could. Do you understand how that sounds? It sounds like I only care about you because you exist. Because you represent the heirs I wanted. That is exactly how it sounds. Victor nodded slowly. I understand why you would think that. And I cannot prove otherwise with words. I can only show you, over time, that my interest in knowing you has nothing to do with legacy or inheritance or any of the things my family values. But that requires time. And it requires you to be willing to give me that time. Why should I? The question hung in the air. Charlotte had gone still near the sink. Maggie watched from her seat at the table, her expression carefully neutral. You should not, Victor said quietly. By any reasonable measure, you owe me nothing. I was not there when you were born. I did not hold you as an infant or teach you to walk or comfort you when you were afraid. Every good thing in your life came from your mother and from each other. I am a stranger who happens to share your DNA. Then why are you here? Because I am tired of being the man who would throw away something precious because it did not arrive on schedule. Victor leaned forward slightly. Because 3 days ago I learned that the worst decision I ever made had consequences I never knew about. And those consequences are 2 remarkable young women who deserved a father and did not have one. I cannot fix that. I cannot give you back the years. But I can try to be present for whatever comes next, if you will let me. Olivia studied him. Her expression did not soften, but something in her posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Mom told us about the invitation, she said. The one you sent for the gala. You wanted her to come so you could show everyone how successful you were without her. How pathetic she had become while you thrived. Yes. That is a deeply petty thing to do. Yes. It is. And now you are sitting in our kitchen acting like you have changed. Like 3 days of self-reflection have somehow erased the person who sent that invitation. Victor was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I have not changed. Not yet. Change takes longer than 3 days. But I have realized that I want to change. That the man who sent that invitation is not someone I want to be anymore. Whether I succeed in becoming someone different remains to be seen. But I am asking for the chance to try. Charlotte spoke from her place by the sink. Liv, he did fly here alone. Without lawyers or handlers or any of the stuff Mom warned us about. That does not mean anything. It means something, Maggie said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. The Victor the First knew would never have done this. Would never have admitted fault. Would never have asked for permission instead of demanding compliance. I am not saying he has changed. But this is not behavior I would have predicted. Olivia looked at her mother. What do you want us to do? I want you to make your own choice. Both of you. I have protected you from him for 15 years, and I do not regret that. But you are old enough now to decide for yourselves what kind of relationship, if any, you want with your biological father. I will support whatever you decide. The kitchen fell silent again. Outside, Verme the cat had appeared on the windowsill, observing the proceedings with feline inscrutability. Finally, Olivia moved. She crossed the kitchen and sat down at the table, not next to Victor but across from him, maintaining the distance even as she reduced it. I have questions, she said. A lot of them. And I expect honest answers, even if they make you look bad. I will answer whatever you ask. Why did you marry Mom in the first place? If legacy and heirs were so important, why choose someone you barely knew? Victor considered the question. Because I loved her. Or believed I did. She was brilliant and kind, and she saw something in me that I wanted to believe was real. When we met, I thought I could have both. The love and the legacy. I did not understand yet that my family's version of legacy leaves no room for love. What changed? Time. Pressure. Every month that passed without a pregnancy became another failure. My father started making comments. My mother arranged meetings with fertility specialists. And slowly, without even realizing it was happening, I stopped seeing Margaret as my wife and started seeing her as a problem to be solved. That is monstrous. Yes, it is. I told myself I was being practical. That difficult decisions required difficult conversations. I used the language of business to describe the end of a marriage because it was easier than admitting I was destroying something I had promised to protect. Olivia absorbed this. Her expression remained hard, but Victor thought he saw something flicker behind her eyes. Not forgiveness. Not even understanding. But perhaps a willingness to continue listening. Mom said you used the word barren. I did. Do you know what that word does to a person? To be told that the core of who they are is defective. Broken. Not worth keeping. I did not know then. Victor's voice was rough. I know now. How can you know? You have never been discarded for failing to meet someone's biological expectations. No. But I have spent 3 days understanding that I discarded someone for exactly that reason. And the weight of that understanding is something I will carry for the rest of my life. Good. The single word was not kind, but it was honest. Victor accepted it as what it was. The beginning of accountability. The conversation continued for another hour. Olivia asked about his family, his business, his marriages after Maggie. She asked about his father's role in the divorce, about the prenuptial agreement that had left her mother with nothing, about the public humiliation of the gossip columns and society whispers. Victor answered everything. He did not deflect or minimize. When Olivia pressed on painful points, he sat with the discomfort instead of trying to escape it. By the time the winter light began to fade outside the kitchen windows, something had shifted in the room. Not resolution, not acceptance, but the beginning of a framework within which future conversations might occur. "I am not ready to call you anything," Olivia said finally. "Not Dad. Not Father. Not even Victor, really. You are just the person who contributed half my DNA. That is all you are right now. I understand. But I am willing to talk again. Not because you deserve it. Because I have questions that only you can answer. And because Mom seems to think there might be something here worth exploring, even though she has every reason to want you gone." Victor looked at Maggie, who met his eyes with an expression he could not quite read. "Your mother is more generous than I deserve," he said. "Yes," Maggie agreed quietly. "She is." Victor left Savannah that evening, but he returned the following weekend. And the weekend after that. He stayed in hotels, never presuming to ask for space in their home. He met the girls for meals and conversations, always on their terms, always respecting the boundaries they set. Olivia remained guarded, her questions sharp and her trust slow to develop. Charlotte was more open, willing to show him her artwork and discuss her college plans and share small details of her daily life. Both of them maintained a careful distance, allowing him into their orbit but not into their hearts. Maggie observed these interactions without interfering. She neither encouraged nor discouraged her daughter's developing relationship with their father. She answered their questions when they asked and offered her own perspective when requested, but she made clear that the choices were theirs to make. And through it all, Victor began to learn what it meant to be present without expectation. To show up consistently without demanding anything in return. To value the small moments of connection that his daughters occasionally allowed, understanding that each one was a gift rather than an entitlement. 2 months after the gala, Victor attended Olivia's regional debate championship. He sat in the back row of the auditorium, trying to be unobtrusive, knowing that his presence might be unwelcome or at least complicated. But Olivia had mentioned the competition during one of their phone calls, and something in her voice had suggested that she might not entirely object to his being there. The topic was constitutional interpretation, and Victor watched his daughter argue with a precision and passion that left him genuinely awed. She moved through complex legal concepts with an ease that belied her 15 years, and when she delivered her closing statement, the room was entirely silent. She won. Afterward, he found her in the hallway outside the auditorium, surrounded by teammates and coaches. She saw him approaching and said something to the group, then walked toward him with a trophy in one hand and an expression that was difficult to read. "You came," she said. "You mentioned it was important." "I mention a lot of things." Victor understood what she was not saying. He had shown up for something that mattered to her, and that meant something, even if she was not ready to acknowledge it directly. "You were exceptional," he said. "The closing argument in particular. The way you structured the constitutional precedents. I have been practicing that structure for months. It shows." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Olivia said, "Mom and Charlotte are meeting me for dinner to celebrate. You could come. If you want." "Are you sure?" "No. But I am asking anyway." Victor understood the significance of the invitation. It was the first time either of his daughters had actively included him in a family moment rather than simply tolerating his presence on the periphery. "I would like that very much," he said. Dinner was at a casual restaurant near the debate venue, chosen by Charlotte specifically because it was not fancy and would not require anyone to dress up or perform. They sat in a corner booth, the four of them, and for the first time Victor experienced something like normalcy. The girls argued about inconsequential things. Charlotte teased Olivia about a boy who had been staring at her during the competition. Olivia retaliated by revealing that Charlotte had tripped over her own feet while leaving art class. Maggie mediated with the practiced ease of a mother who had navigated 15 years of twin dynamics. And Victor watched, mostly silent, absorbing every moment like a man who had been starving and was finally being allowed to eat. At some point, Charlotte looked at him and said, "You are being very quiet." "I am listening." "To what?" "To you. All of you." He hesitated. "I have spent my entire life talking. Commanding rooms. Controlling conversations. I am discovering that listening is significantly more valuable." Olivia snorted. "That is quite the revelation for a man who built an empire on never shutting up." "It is," Victor agreed. I am a slow learner in some areas. The rest of the dinner passed in something approaching comfortable conversation. It was not perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness, questions that led to difficult territory, silences that carried the weight of all that remained unresolved. But there was also laughter, genuine and unforced, and Victor found himself smiling in ways he had not smiled in years. Afterward, as they walked to their respective cars, Maggie fell into step beside him while the girls walked ahead, still debating something. "You are doing better than I expected," she said. "Is that a compliment?" "It is an observation." She paused. "The girls are starting to see you as a person rather than a symbol. That is significant. What about you?" Maggie was quiet for a moment. "I am reserving judgment. You hurt me very badly, Victor. The kind of hurt that does not heal quickly, if it heals at all. I have built a life that is complete without you, and I do not intend to restructure it around your presence. I am not asking you to." "Good. Because I would not do it regardless." They reached the cars. The girls were already climbing into Maggie's sedan, their voices carrying through the evening air. "But I am glad you came tonight," Maggie said. It meant something to Olivia, even if she would rather chew glass than admit it. "I will keep showing up," Victor said. "For as long as they will let me. That is all anyone can ask." She turned and walked to her car without looking back. Victor stood in the parking lot and watched them drive away, then drove to his hotel alone, feeling something he could not quite name settling in his chest. It might have been hope. Or it might have been the beginning of understanding what he had lost and could never fully recover. The pressure from Victor's family began almost immediately after the gala and intensified as the weeks passed. His father summoned him to the family estate in Connecticut 3 weeks after his first visit to Savannah. The elder Hartwell was waiting in the library, a room designed to intimidate with its floor-to-ceiling shelves and leather furniture that had been old when Victor was a child. "You are making a spectacle of yourself," his father said without preamble. "Flying to Georgia. Attending school events. Acting as though these girls are somehow more important than the company that bears your name. They are my daughters. They are strangers who appeared at an opportune moment to claim a connection to Hartwell wealth." His father's voice was cold. "Their mother kept them hidden for 15 years. That alone should tell you everything you need to know about her motivations. Her motivations were to protect them from exactly this kind of conversation. Do not be naive, Victor. You were always too susceptible to sentiment. First with that woman, now with these children you have never met. The board is concerned. Your brother is already positioning himself to take advantage of your absence. Let him." The elder Hartwell's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Surprise. And something that might have been concern. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that Anthony can have the daily operations. He has wanted them for years. I will remain on the board, but my focus is going to change." "To what?" "Playing house with a family that materialized out of nowhere. To learning what actually matters." Victor met his father's eyes steadily. "I have spent my entire adult life doing what you expected. Building what you valued. Measuring success by your standards. And I have nothing to show for it except money and regret. You have an empire. I have a company. It is not the same thing. And I am tired of pretending it is." The silence that followed was heavy with decades of unspoken conflict. Victor had never directly challenged his father. He had always found ways to accommodate, to comply while maintaining the illusion of independence. But something had changed in him since the night of the gala, and he found he could no longer sustain the pretense. "You will destroy everything we have built," his father said finally. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I will discover that what we built was never worth as much as we believed." Victor left the estate that evening and did not return for many months. Spring arrived slowly in Savannah, the azaleas blooming in explosions of pink and purple along the historic streets. Victor had established a rhythm by now. Weekend visits when his schedule permitted. Phone calls with the girls twice a week. A patient accumulation of small moments that gradually built toward something larger. Charlotte had warmed to him more quickly than her sister, sharing her artwork and her college anxieties and the complicated social dynamics of her friend group. She had started calling him Victor to his face, which felt like progress. Olivia remained more guarded, but her hostility had softened into something more like skepticism. She still tested him regularly, asking pointed questions designed to reveal inconsistency or self-interest. But she had stopped expecting him to fail those tests quite so completely. And Maggie. Victor's relationship with Maggie remained the most complicated thread in the tapestry he was trying to weave. They were polite with each other, even occasionally warm, but there was a distance between them that neither seemed inclined to bridge. Too much had happened. Too many years had passed. They could be co-parents, perhaps even friends eventually, but the damage from their marriage would never fully heal. Or so Victor had believed, until the evening in April when Maggie invited him to her studio. She had never shown him her workspace before. Their interactions had always occurred in neutral territory or in the family home, with the girls present as a buffer. But the girls were at a school event that evening, and Maggie had suggested he stop by the studio to see a restoration she was completing. Victor arrived to find her working on a large canvas, carefully cleaning away decades of neglect from what appeared to be a family portrait from the 19th century. The subjects were a man and woman in formal dress, their expressions the carefully composed neutrality of long exposure times. "It is beautiful," Victor said. "It will be. When I am finished." Maggie did not look up from her work. The varnish had yellowed badly, and there was water damage along the lower edge. But the underlying painting is exceptional. Sometimes you have to strip away what time has deposited to see what was always there. Victor stood in the doorway, uncertain whether he was welcome to enter fully. "Is that what you do? Reveal what was hidden?" "That is one way to describe it." Maggie set down her brush and finally looked at him. "I take things that have been damaged by neglect and time and I restore them to something like their original beauty. Though they are never quite the same. The repairs are always visible, if you know where to look." Victor understood that she was not talking only about paintings. "May I come in?" Maggie gestured to a chair near her work table, and Victor sat down. The studio was filled with the evidence of her profession. Canvases in various states of repair. Bottles of solvents and pigments. Photographs documenting before and after states. It was a space that spoke of patience and precision and the belief that broken things could be made whole. "I have been wanting to talk to you," Maggie said. "Without the girls. There are things I have not said." "What things?" She was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "When I left New York after the divorce, I was broken. Not just hurt, but fundamentally damaged. You had taken everything I believed about myself and shown me that it was worthless. My value as a wife. My value as a woman. My value as a human being. All of it reduced to my failure to produce children." Victor felt the weight of her words like stones on his chest. "I spent years rebuilding," Maggie continued. "Learning to see myself as someone worthy of love and respect, even if I never had another child. And then I discovered I was pregnant, and everything changed again." "How?" "Because suddenly I had to choose. I could reach out to you, tell you about the pregnancy, and hope that you had changed. Or I could protect my children from a man who had already demonstrated what he thought of women who did not meet his standards. You chose to protect them. I chose to protect myself." Maggie's voice was steady but heavy with old pain. "I could not survive going back to you, Victor. Even for the sake of the children. The woman you had turned me into, the one who believed she was defective and broken and worthless, that woman would have destroyed herself trying to please you. I had to choose between being their mother and being your wife. I could not be both." Victor absorbed this. The enormity of what he had done pressed down on him, not just the cruelty of the divorce but the impossible choice he had forced upon her. "I understand," he said finally. "Do you? I forced you to choose between your own survival and including me in our children's lives. You chose survival. I cannot blame you for that. I can only wish I had been someone different. Someone who deserved to be trusted." Maggie picked up her brush again but did not resume working. She held it like an anchor, something to grip while navigating difficult waters. "I have watched you with the girls these past months," she said. "You are trying. I can see that. You show up. You listen. You do not demand or manipulate or try to control. It is not the behavior I would have predicted. I am trying to become someone who deserves what I am asking for." "What are you asking for?" "A chance. To be part of their lives. To be present for what comes next, even though I was absent for everything that came before." He paused. "I am not asking for forgiveness. I know I do not deserve that. I am just asking for the opportunity to do better. Maggie was quiet for a long time. Outside the studio windows, the evening light was fading, casting long shadows across the damaged painting and the woman who was slowly bringing it back to life. When I first saw you at the gala, she said finally, I felt nothing but satisfaction. The look on your face when you realized who the girls were. The public humiliation you had planned turned back on you. I will not pretend I did not enjoy that. I would not expect you to pretend otherwise. But watching you since then, seeing you with Charlotte and Olivia, the way you have shown up without demanding anything in return. Maggie shook her head slightly. It has complicated my feelings. In what way? I built my identity around being the woman you discarded. The one who survived. The one who proved you wrong by raising remarkable daughters without any help from you or your family. If you become someone different, if you genuinely change, then some part of me has to let go of that narrative. And you do not want to. I do not know what I want. She looked at him directly. You broke something in me, Victor. Something fundamental. I have rebuilt myself around that broken place, but the scar is still there. Every time I look at you, I feel it. Victor nodded slowly. I cannot undo what I did. I cannot erase the scar. But I can try, every day, to be someone who would never inflict that kind of wound again. Whether or not you ever believe I have succeeded is not up to me. It is up to you. The studio was very quiet. The painting on the easel seemed to watch them, the 19th century couple frozen in their moment of formal stillness. I am not ready to forgive you, Maggie said finally. I may never be ready. But I am willing to acknowledge that you are not the same man who handed me divorce papers and told me I was defective. That man would never have sat in my kitchen answering Olivia's questions without deflecting. That man would never have attended a high school debate tournament. That man would never have walked away from his father's expectations without a fight. I am learning, Victor said. Slowly. But I am learning. Maggie nodded. Then keep learning. And keep showing up. The girls are starting to care about you, whether they admit it or not. Do not make me regret allowing that to happen. I will not. She returned to her work then, the brush moving with careful precision across the damaged canvas. Victor sat and watched her, this woman he had once loved and then destroyed and was now trying, in some small way, to make amends to. After a while, he asked, what happens to a painting after you restore it? It goes back to the people who own it. They hang it on their wall and see what was always there, underneath the damage. Sometimes they appreciate it more than they did before, because they understand now how easily it could have been lost. Is that what you hope for? Appreciation. I hope for understanding. Maggie did not look up. I hope people learn to take care of the things that matter before they need restoration. Victor left the studio that evening with the weight of her words settling into his bones. He understood now what she had been telling him. Not just about paintings. About all of it. The damage he had inflicted, the restoration she had accomplished alone, and the scars that would always remain, no matter how carefully he tried to make amends. Some things, once broken, could never be fully repaired. They could only be acknowledged, lived with, and learned from. And that was its own kind of justice. Summer brought changes that Victor had not anticipated. His father suffered a minor stroke in June. It was not life-threatening, but it served as a reminder that the patriarch's grip on the Hartwell empire was loosening whether he wished it or not. Anthony assumed more responsibility. Board dynamics shifted, and Victor found himself increasingly peripheral to the company he had once believed was the center of his life. He discovered that he did not mind. The weekends in Savannah had become the anchor of his existence. He rented a small house near the historic district, close enough to be available but far enough to respect boundaries. Charlotte started coming by to use the better light in his living room for her painting. Olivia occasionally joined them for dinner, her guard lowering by degrees so small they were almost imperceptible. One evening in July, the four of them gathered on Maggie's back porch, eating ice cream and watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. It was the kind of ordinary moment that Victor had never experienced in his previous life. No agenda. No strategic purpose. Just people enjoying each other's company. Mom said you turned down a board seat on a Fortune 500 company, Charlotte said. Her spoon paused halfway to her mouth. Victor nodded. They wanted me to join their technology committee. It would have meant traveling extensively. And you said no because I would rather be here. He gestured at the porch, the fireflies, the three women who had become the center of his world. I have spent my entire adult life chasing things that did not matter. I am not interested in doing that anymore. Olivia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Dad turned down a Fortune 500 board seat to eat ice cream with us. It was the first time she had called him Dad. Victor felt something crack open in his chest. Not pain, though it was related to pain. Something more like the release of pressure that had been building for a very long time. He did not comment on it. He understood that acknowledging the moment might make Olivia self-conscious, might cause her to retreat back behind the wall she had been slowly lowering. Instead, he simply said, I would turn down considerably more than that for this ice cream. What flavor is this? Salted caramel, Charlotte said. Mom's favorite. It is excellent. The moment passed, but Victor did not forget it. Later that night, alone in his rented house, he sat on the porch and watched the moon rise over Savannah's rooftops and allowed himself to feel what he had felt when Olivia called him Dad. It was not redemption. He knew he had not earned that. But it was something. A crack in the wall. A glimpse of what might be possible if he continued to show up, continued to listen, continued to put their needs above his own expectations. He had wasted 15 years. He could not get them back. But he could try, every day, to deserve the second chance he was being given. The fall brought Olivia's junior year and Charlotte's intensifying focus on college applications. Victor helped where he could, reviewing essays and discussing options, but he was careful not to push. These were their decisions to make, their futures to shape. His relationship with Maggie had evolved into something neither of them could have predicted. They were not friends exactly, but they were no longer adversaries. They could sit together at the girls' events without tension. They could share a meal without the weight of the past pressing down on every word. They had found, through patience and time, a kind of peace. One evening in October, after a parent-teacher conference they had attended together, Maggie suggested they walk through the historic district before heading home. The air was cool, the streets quiet, the old buildings lit by gas lamps that had been converted to electricity decades ago but still cast the same warm glow. I have been thinking about the Gala, Maggie said as they walked. About why I really went. Victor waited, sensing that she needed to articulate something she had been carrying. I told myself it was for the girls. To give them the chance to meet you. To close a chapter that had been open too long. But that was not the whole truth. What was the whole truth? Maggie was quiet for a moment. I wanted you to see what you lost. Not just the daughters, though that was part of it. I wanted you to see me. The woman I became after you destroyed the woman I had been. I wanted you to understand that your judgment was wrong. That I was not defective. That I had value you were too blind to see. Did it work? Maggie smiled slightly, but it was not entirely a happy smile. I thought it would feel like victory. Watching your face when you realized. Seeing your world collapse the way mine had collapsed 15 years earlier. I thought I would feel satisfied. But you did not. I felt sad. For all of us. For the years we lost. For the family we might have been if you had been a different person. For the girls, who grew up without a father. Even for you, though you did not deserve my sadness. They stood together in the Christmas quiet, two people who had hurt each other deeply and had found, through time and patience, a way to coexist. Not as lovers. Not even as friends, exactly. But as something. Partners in the project of being present for two young women who deserved the best both of them could offer. Happy Christmas, Maggie said finally. Happy Christmas. She went inside, and Victor remained on the porch for a while longer, watching the lights and thinking about the year that had passed. The man he had been. The man he was becoming. The long road that still stretched ahead. He had not earned forgiveness. He might never earn it. But he had been given something almost as precious. A chance. An opportunity. The grace of being allowed to try. And in the end, that was the only gift that truly mattered. If you have ever been written off, underestimated, or told you were not enough, remember this. Your worth is not determined by those who fail to see it. The people who discard you for not meeting their expectations reveal only their own limitations, not yours. And if you have ever been the one doing the discarding, the one measuring others by standards that had nothing to do with their true value, it is not too late to change. It is never too late to become someone better, someone kinder, someone worthy of the grace that might still be offered. The brutal billionaire who sent that invitation learned this truth the hard way. He lost 15 years that he could never recover. He damaged people in ways that would never fully heal. But he also discovered, in the end, that the things he thought he wanted, the heirs, the legacy, the continuation of his family name, mattered far less than the things he had overlooked. Presence. Connection. The daily choice to show up and listen and love without expectation. Margaret Allison built something beautiful from the ashes of her destroyed marriage. She raised 2 remarkable daughters who owed their father nothing and chose to let him in anyway. She proved, through 15 years of quiet strength, that the judgment he had passed on her said everything about him and nothing about her. And in the end, the true legacy was not the Hartwell empire or the family name or the fortune that would pass to the next generation. The true legacy was this: 4 people, connected by blood and history and hard-won understanding, learning to become a family in the only way that matters. Not through inheritance, but through choice. Not through obligation, but through love. Not through what they owed each other, but through what they freely gave. Thank you for joining me for this story of judgment and grace, of loss and recovery, of the long, slow work of becoming someone worthy of forgiveness. Until next time, take care of each other. And remember that it is never too late to begin again.